moving you around in a circle. A lot of dogs that will stress them high. So my border collie, if I want him to cut me off, the best way I can do it in demonstration is just turn in the circle really quick and then stop. Because where is he going to end up? He's like, good. He gets in a hurry mode. He wants to go in a big circle, and then when I stop, he goes this way. Now, he may not do it sometimes because that's how I test him. And then I correct. So when he comes across my foot, what do you think I do? Inside circle. He does not like. And he's like, correct. Okay, then we go again. So my test is, can I do that and then stop, and he goes out of his way to go. The best is when he almost falls over because he's like, oh no. Right? So if he can put that amount of effort in to realize that he's got to stop with me, it becomes part of the game. Right? So everything that they do on your start is going to be pushing a lot. I just see a lot of people where they just create that circle of going back and going back and going back. So I would rather see you fix forward movement with pressure to move them back. So they're thinking about moving back into position opposed to going in a circle back into position. I just find that they don't catch that very well. Does that make sense? I also try not to physically put them in position because that usually starts a fight. Plus, anytime you physically move the dog, you basically said you're not worth communicating with. Right? I'm not going to try to make you understand or have a conversation. I'm just physically going to put you there. It's a lack of patience on your part. Right? So I don't find it has good results. It actually usually has very stressful results. Anybody ever see the dogs that kind of walk forward like they're in a trance on the start line, especially border collies? Creep. Right? So they creep forward, and they stare up into nothing, and they do this. Or they scoot forward like that, or they lay on their belly and they crawl like that. And then the handler comes back and the dog goes like this. When they do that, they really have no idea they're moving. So they have no sense of the fact that their feet are moving. They really don't know. Right? I've seen Heist do a full set of weave pulls in a trance like that, where he actually weaves at about this speed. Right? And I've actually, I can walk up to him and there's just no one there. He's just gone. And if you were to say weave, halfway through, he would go back into full motion. So they really don't, he has no clue. I've had him do a teeter-totter before, where he did his 2-on-2 off with back leg in the air. He stood there for a good 3 minutes before his arousal level came down, then he noticed he had a foot off the ground. So a lot of the dogs, when they're stopping forward like that, the problem is that they're too high. So we need to come up with ways to take them down a peg at the start, and that will help you get the start line routine. Does that make sense? Okay? So it doesn't matter how good your stay is, if your dog is too far gone, they're at a 10, right? They can't function. It does not matter how well your start line is trained, the dog will physically not be able to do it. Mentally, there's no dog. They could be walking and they don't know they're walking. It's like sleepwalking, right? They're just tranced out. So if that's the case, if you notice that your dog does that, what's the thing we need to fix? The start line or the arousal level? Arousal. The more you punish the start line, what happens when you punish something that's stressful? So now they're going from a 10 to an 11, right? So that's why it's when you go back and you physically correct start lines like that, they get worse, not better. Right? I'm not telling you not to correct it. The first thing that we need to do is make sure that the dog can actually think. It's not fair to be punishing a dog that doesn't know they're doing it. Right? So then they're going to get really worried because they don't know what they're being punished for, and then it becomes really stressful. And soon you're walking the ring and you get so start line. This is why people give up on start lines, because they create such an issue there that they just quit because it stresses the dog out so bad that it becomes a problem. Okay, so the first thing we need to deal with is the stress. Okay. So if you can correct with your body language and you've already taught the dog what that means, it gives you a way to have that communication without necessarily having to physically touch them in that way. The other one that's really important is to know what signs from you help the dog. Okay? So with Heist, I find that him actually jumping up on me calms him a bit. So not like jumping up and down, but just coming up and putting his front feet on me. So that I can relax, make sure you're relaxed, right? My shoulders go back, I'm like up like this, go boy. I rub his ears, I rub his face, right? Everything's very slow because it has to be in that even kind of keel. The one thing I have to watch with him now, because he's been competing a bit now, is that when the leash comes off, he tends to go higher. So when the leash comes off, he used to just go into a sit and I would take the leash off and he would sit there and run. Now the leash comes off and his butt starts to raise up a little bit. Right? So I have to make sure that the leash coming off, sometimes I'll take the leash off and just have him jump up on me opposed to start. So that I'm associating the leash coming off with calming things, not we're about to go. Because if he thinks he's about to go, right, he's climbing up that scale really quickly. Does that make sense? So you
one dog did that. I got pretty excited once I started to leash off.
Yes.
I walk on the limit. So I ended up not. I go into the ring off leash.
Yeah, which is fine.
So
Yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah. As long as you have control and the dog is off leash. I started him on leash. I now take him off. But I have to make sure that I have control and that he's not starting to hurt my feet on the way in. So he's not starting to cut me off. He's not starting to turn in front of me. Right? So if he comes in on leash and he is kind of, I usually just do quick trick behaviors like left, right, stuff like that.
One of those circles, trying to come in one of those circles.
Dog on the outside, just be careful he's not cutting in front. Because a lot of times what happens is before we turn, they've turned. And in their mind, they're moving us. Right? So some dogs don't care. Dice, she likes that. But I'm also trying to promote drive. So just make sure if you're doing a circle, guys, this is the circle test. I will let you do outside circles as long as when you run the circle, if you stop suddenly, watch where the dog is. If they're across your feet, they're moving you. If they're not, and they line up straight, I have absolutely no problem with that. Right? My dog takes that as an indicator because he loves circles so much. Border collie, I always say when a border collie completes a circle, they lose brain cells because they just get tired. A lot of breeds don't do that, right? And a lot of particular dogs don't do that. So we're not picking on the border collies. Yeah, the focus is on you, and you stop. If the dog focuses on you and not on move and not on the circle, right? Then when you stop, your dog's just going to stop parallel. I don't problem with that. Pass the circle test, you're fine. If your dog is obsessed with the circle, right? They're not following you. They're running a big circle, kind of like they do around the flock of sheep. It has nothing to do with you, right? So my dog fails the circle test most times. It's like I go in a circle, I stop, he's still circling. So he wasn't working with me on that circle. He was moving around by himself. He was focusing on the circle, not on my hand. Does that make sense? Okay. The other one that's really important to be able to do, I find, is changing them up on the start line. So a lot of times when you release them forward, I'm a big fan of multiple changes. Right. So when I lead out, I want to make sure that sometimes when I put my dog into that position, down, sit, good, good, back up, good, break. Okay? Because then he can't predict. He thinks me walking out means you're about to go forward. So if I can, plus it will tell me where he is arousal-wise. Because if he's in a sit and I say down, he stares like that, and I say down, and he's like, where is he? Should I release him? He's about to do something stupid when I do. Right? So at that point, he's giving you, or they're giving you a chance to realize that they're too high to do what you're about to ask them to do. Does that make sense? Right? So I like to change it up on them and get them to do simple changes of position. The other one for impulse control, because start lines really do come down for these dogs with impulse control, because they're not breaking because they're stressed for the most part. They're breaking because they want to go forward. Right? With our for speed dogs, most of them are breaking because they're worried. Right? They could be worried, and they can stress high when they're worried and therefore get anxious of me. But for the most part, we need to make sure that they can do simple change, listening to simple changes of position in front of a distraction. Because the distraction is jump. The dog wants the jumps, right? Most of these dogs want to do the jump. Okay? So one of my favorite ones is just throw a cookie or a ball or a toy, whatever. Can you down the dog when they're partway to it? Basic impulse control. I told you to stop midway. Can you stop? Right? If they can't, that's an exercise you need to teach them. Right? Because if they can't, and you can have them on leash to train that, because well, if I put a cookie on the ground or put a toy on the ground, what happens when they go to it? You can have them on leash. It's not like they need to go far. Can they even have it there and you can just sit down with them there? Because if they can't think through the fact that there's a distractor in front of them, every obstacle for these dogs is like a toy. Right? So like I said, my dog's going to have a harder time listening to me in front of a tunnel than he would if I put his favorite tug toy up there. Because to him, that tunnel is the most valuable thing in this room. And that's not a bad thing, but that means my amount of impulse control I have in front of a tunnel, right, needs to be very strong. For him, it's not so much, so I tend to use a ball. But even this morning, throwing a ball. He's, okay, ready, go. He's going, count. You better not be on the ball. Okay, get it. You know, so that they just start to think that it's not always what they are thinking about, because a lot of them try to think ahead of you. So when they're trying to think of 5 obstacles in advance, they may think the wrong thing. You have to be able to change their mind. Make sense? Okay, so if your dog has start line problems, one of the things I want you to make sure that you're doing is getting them to do opposites, like down when they think they're going to go forward. Okay, because that will start getting them a little bit easier to get that impulse control. Because a dog that has no impulse control is not going to stop when you tell them to stop. Right? They're just going to keep going and getting what they want. Okay, so all we're going to do, we're going to bring our dogs in however you would. Again, we do it 2 at a time.